Hello everyone, this is David Cease at Practical Catholic. Mobile devices such as the iPhone and Android phones in the Catholic Church typically has a bad rap and is usually frowned on. Even at Mass, they start telling people to silence or turn off their mobile devices. You just have to look at kids on their phones and constantly texting, social media, or taking pictures of themselves. It can be so addictive. But can mobile devices be used to help us grow spiritually? And if so, how? Hello everyone, today's episode is about my 10 favorite mobile apps and how to effectively use them to grow spiritually and the spiritual risks of using mobile devices and how to mitigate those risks.
Welcome to another episode of Practical Catholic with David Cease. Practical Catholic is a spiritual coaching show to help you find peace, love, and joy in family and work life. We are here each and every week to help you grow spiritually, to become successful in this life, and to be a saint for the life after.
My story begins when I was at a field artillery school in the Marines. When I was enlisted, my job was artillery. And a little background about artillery, there's three major components in artillery. There's the eyes of the artillery, which are people who they're called forward observers. They're on the front lines, and they direct where the rounds will go, and hopefully toward the enemy. And then there's the brains of the artillery. That's called the FDC, Fire Direction Controlman. They're the people who basically get the coordinates from the forward observer, the eyes, and they calculate it based off of all these different kinds of calculations. And then they give the coordinates and the amount of what they call powder, the explosives, to kind of move this projectile through space to the guns, which are called the muscle. The muscle of the artillery is the actual physical guns. But they need to actually get coordinates so that they can adjust the guns to go up or down or left or right, and then how much powder that they need to send this projectile a certain distance to the target. So my job in artillery was FDC, so we were the brains of the artillery. Our school was about, I would say 10 weeks long, or at least I was there for 10 weeks. I think the actual school or classroom time was about 8 weeks. And in that period of 8 weeks, 7 of those weeks were dedicated in learning how to calculate rounds. It's very complex. It was a very manual process, and you have to, know all these things like the Coriolis effect, on rounds, and weather effects on rounds, and everything that you can think of. How to transpose the coordinates from the forward observers to where the battery is and the location. We had to know about survey and land and trigonometry almost to figure out, different types of where you are on Earth. So it was a pretty complex process, and we learned how to do it all manually. And our final exam was, very complex because we had to act like a team. Because, when the infantry calls for artillery support, you don't have a lot of time to react, to figure out, well, let me figure out where, I'm going to put this round and do all these calculations. So the Marine Corps taught us how to do it manually as well as a team, so we could do it at the quickest rate manually. So we had one guy that was the radio man who would be talking to the forward observer. We had another Marine that was the plotter. He plotted the target on the map. And then another one was the weatherman. He would knew everything about the weather and how that would affect the round. Another person was the what was he? The radio man for the guns. And then the last person was the coordinator. The coordinator would, pretty much make sure that the process was occurring in a very sequential and basic way. So we all had to act like a team. So there's 6, 7 of us all there, and we had to call for fire. So the forward observer would call his coordinates, and he would give us what needed to be done, and we would calculate it, and then we would, send the coordinates and the powder to the guns, and they would fire a couple of rounds. And it was very proud when they fired the rounds, and then you would hear the forward observer saying, target destroyed, meaning like we effectively did everything right. And we did various things and, various scenarios that we were taught, like check fire. Check fire means, that we accidentally are shooting rounds on our friendly fire, and the forward observer is saying check fire, meaning stop, you're firing, which is an immediate stop, and we had to do these different scenarios. And it was really, really interesting. It was great. It was thrilling. So that was about like 7 weeks of our training. And after the 7 weeks were done, we knew we had one more week left. And so we asked the Ghani, who was our instructor, what are we going to learn? So lo and behold, the last week, he shows us this little, looks like a calculator, a big calculator. And he goes, this is what we're going to learn now for the last week. And we're like, what is it? And he goes, this is what you're going to be using out in the fleet to do your calculations. And basically what it was that it was nothing more than a calculator where you could just put in the coordinates of the forward observer, and voila, within literally, ask maybe 2 or 3 questions, and then it would calculate exactly what we had to give to the guns. And it only took us a week to learn it and to practice it, and that was it. And we're scratching our head going, why did we just spend 7 weeks, to learn this manual process of calculating these rounds when we could just use this technology, this big calculator? The class could have been 1 week long, and this is what we're using in the fleet anyway. So we were kind of curious. So we asked Ghani, we said, well, Ghani, why is it that we're learning this manual process? That's taking seven weeks to do that. And he said to us, because if this, calculator is destroyed, or if you don't have it, you're going to have to fall back to the manual process, because the mission has to continue regardless of whether you have this or not. And so that was the lesson to be learned, that we had a fallback system, and it was the manual system that in case the technology does not work. What if the battery is dead? What if they all broke? What if because there's a lot of counter battery that would try to blow us up? There's very complex things. So the reason why I bring that up is because I'm going to give you the opposite. The manual process should always be our primary, and our backup system should be our technology, The world, the technology is the primary, and the manual process is the backup. But in our case, in spirituality, my rule is that the primary is always the manual process. It always is, and then the backup system, the technology is the backup system. And as we go through the technology, you'll see why, or you'll see what I mean when I say that, So let's first talk about technology, and what do I mean by manual versus, technology, technology. What I'm going to say is this, So for example, the Liturgy of the Hours. I have the Liturgy of the Hours, and I have the book, right? And a lot of times, the tertiaries, when I'm teaching the Liturgy of the Hours, a lot of them, the first question, at least half of them will ask is, I found this app called iBreviary, and why can't I just use that? Why am I learning how to use the Christian prayer book or the 4-volume Liturgy of the Hours book? And I always tell them, I said, you can use that, because they're always kind of scared about all the rules and the flipping and the seasons and everything else, while everything there in the iBreviary is just there. And, I'm a firm believer that you use the manual process for several reasons. One is, you're going to learn it better. You're going to be more conscientious about doing your prayers, as well as you're going to be able to understand fully what you're doing. And you're not going to be distracted by the technology. In fact, I wouldn't rely on technology. I would always believe in manual process. Now, I do use the iBreviary phone app, but I use it more as a backup. And I'll talk about it when we talk about the technologies, okay? But so I'm a big fan of manual process. So it's hard for me to kind of tell these new tertiaries or prospects coming in, you can't use iBreviary, because I do use it every once in a while. But it really isn't the best way of doing that. We'll discuss that down the road a little more. But always the manual process. It's kind of like the difference between driving a manual car and a stick shift, a manual car with a stick shift and a automatic. People can easily zone out with an automatic car, but with a manual, you feel like you're part of that car. There's better participation. Okay, so manual. Always use that as a primary, technology as more of a backup. The second thing I want to talk about technology is basic moral principles, okay? It's very easy to say mobile devices or technology is evil, right? You look at kids and the effects, the socio effects of things that occurred. I'm sure that when cars came out first and it was all the people who were riding horses probably said, "Oh, those cars are evil," or airplanes are evil, or all these things. So it's very easy to be negative on the aspect of technology, just generally speaking, and say it is evil. And the Catholic Church, from a moral principle, will tell you that technology of in itself is not evil, is not intrinsically evil, okay? Which means that it's morally neutral, like a knife, right? A knife is morally neutral. We use it really depends on how we use it, right? If we use it for good purposes, like cooking and cleaning and those types of things, or as a tool to build things, then that's great. But if we use the knife to kill someone, murder someone, well, then that's evil, right? It's how you're using that tool will determine its good or badness of it. So with technology, right? If we're using technology for evil intentions, hacking into something, hacking into banks to steal money, then yeah, that's bad. Or maybe we're obsessed. That's one thing that technology occurs, and it's probably the most common moral issue is that we are so attached and obsessed with the mobile device. I remember talking to a friend of mine one time, and he kind of jokingly said, my mobile device is like my brain. If I don't have it, I am lost. Well, that's pretty obsessive, right? So that's very attached. We need to, and that was just a joke that he was saying. We can't be obsessed with it. If it's the end all be all, that's what happens, and that's why it's very important that we don't really expose our younger kids to mobile devices. In our house, we actually don't give a mobile device or social media or anything until their senior year in high school. And a lot of people are shocked, right? They're like, wow, that late? And I know people who don't even give it to them at all, right? But I think, senior year should be fine because, it's easier to be addicted to things and obsessed with things as you expose to them at an earlier age. It's just psychology and it's science, habits created at a younger age are easier to create, as well as, and when you say habits, they could be bad habits like vices, right? And obsessions, and they become harder to break because they're so embedded into our brain at a younger age. While at an older age, it's easier. The other aspect of technology, especially when it comes to social media, for young kids, is that they haven't matured enough to create boundaries and to create, how can I say, warning signs. And if they're on social media, it's very easy to be manipulated both by their peers, so they feel like they're being bullied, or by adults who are predators out there. So, in our house, why take that risk? So senior year, we slowly introduce them to a mobile device. It's very controlled until they go to college, and then it's a little bit more open in college. By that time, hopefully they'll be 18 years old, they're mature, and they're technically a legal adult. So the other thing that's even bad, and it's probably it's also, I would say, in some makes us lukewarm, is the distractions. Okay, the mobile devices create distractions, and we'll talk about that down on the risks of mobile devices. But these distractions really hurt our spirituality if they are to occur. And then the last is that they create a lot of rabbit holes or red herrings that you slowly get you away from what your intention is to be, and they waste a lot of time, or they put you in hot water, like all of a sudden you're in a pornographic site, or you're in some kind of a liberal site reading liberal ideologies or something like that. So those are the cautions. Again, the device itself is morally neutral, but they have this effect and how we use it that is that can lead us into a sinful aspect. Okay, so let's get to the heart of this talk, and that is, what are my top 10 favorite iPhone apps? Now, I apologize for anyone who uses Androids, but I'm sure that there's the Android version of what I'm going to talk about. I think all of them do, except for probably one. I can almost guarantee you all of them do, except for one of them. But it's, but I use an iPhone, so so that's why I'm going to be referencing the iPhone. But again, there's probably an Android version of it as well. So I'm going to go from the least to the greatest. So number 10. Number 10 is notes. So iPhone has this ability to type down notes, and this syncs with my, with my laptop. And so a lot of times I'll write down certain spiritual inspirations or thoughts or ideas on the notes. Or maybe I'm doing a novena, and I'll copy and paste the novena. Let's say I go to EW10's website, and I'll copy a novena, St. Jude's novena, and I'll put a little note down there that says, I started this on, January 1st. And then I calculate that it's a 9-day novena, so I'm done on January 8th when it's complete. So, so you kind of look at that aspect of it. So you can put notes, you can put spiritual thoughts and ideas. And if you're doing a podcast like me, I put other, podcast ideas in there. Now, I do use OneNotes as well, but I'm talking about just simply notes, the iPhone notes. All right. Number 9, voice recording. The voice recording. It's a great app. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of ideas why it's a great app. One is you can record your prayers so you can listen to them, okay? So, sometimes, in a busy day or something like that, I might not be able to sit down and fully do my prayers. So what I do is I'll record actually some of my prayers, my morning prayers. I know I should memorize them, but sometimes, I can't do that. So I'll record them on the voice recording. And then let's say I'm driving, I will listen to it and I will pray with it. Okay. That's one idea. The other is, again, recording spiritual thoughts and ideas. I'm a firm believer in part of meditating or at least understanding scripture or whatever is talking it out. I do this kind of a meditation where I actually try to pretend that I'm a priest. And if I were to do a homily on a topic or a scripture quote or whatever, what would I say about it? What would I say? And even though you might not want to have other people listen to it, you might actually want to listen to yourself, and but most importantly, actually try to explain it. They always say that there's a big difference between trying to learn something versus trying to teach something, right? It's great that you're learning algebra, but now try to teach algebra. And they always say that when you try to teach a topic, you learn it a lot better. So in a sense, you can use your voice recorder to, record, let's say, your own homily. Now, you don't have to have other people listen to it. You can listen to it yourself and say, am I convincing, or are there holes in it, okay? And it'll help you grow spiritually by explaining it to something and then listening to it, okay? We call that a diatribe, and if you read a letter to the Romans, a letter to the Romans is in essence a diatribe of St. Paul, right? He's pretending that he's arguing with a Jewish person who has certain objectives. Can you do that? Creating some form of diatribe, and then listen to your diatribe. Okay, they will help you grow spiritually because, again, it's great to listen to great theologians and great priests and listen to them, but really you want to be self-sustaining and be able to kind of meditate and think on your own. And this is a great way of doing that. Maybe if you're even thinking about writing a book, it's a great way to write a book as well. Writing your thoughts and ideas, recording your thoughts and ideas, and then eventually someone transcribing them. You can go to Fiverr, a place like Fiverr, and they'll transcribe usually like a 20-minute segment for $5 or something like that. Very cheap, nothing expensive. The other is number 8 for me is the camera. Oh, I love the camera. The camera takes pictures. What I do is sometimes if I want to take a reference, like a priest friend of mine who is learning the traditional Mass, he showed me a book and he said, David, hey, look at this book. This book is really good. It kind of talks about the traditional Mass and how to do it. And so I was like, oh, Father, let me try to see if I can get that book. So I just quickly took a picture of the book, cover of the book, and I have now a picture. Instead of writing it down, you just take a picture of it, and boom, you have the whole thing and what it looks like. So that's one thing. Taking pictures of prayers. There's times where, maybe you have a novena or something that that you want to take a picture of it real quickly so that you can pray it and you have it with you all the time. I do that. I have a couple of morning prayers that I have to say as a tertiary. I just took the pictures of them, and if I don't have my prayer book, my tertiary prayer book, I know I have the minimum prayers on my camera, and I just look at it and I do my prayers. So very easy to take those pictures. It takes no more than 2 seconds. You're not transcribing them. You're just taking a picture of them and you're praying them, and now you have a backup, right? A backup of those prayers. Again, my go-to is always the book. We have our tertiary prayer book called How to Make 'Em. And there's certain key prayers that I have a backup of, which is pictures in my camera. So in case I forgot the book, or in case I didn't have the book, or I didn't bring it, or sometimes if I'm traveling, I might not want to bring the book just because of certain things that are going on. So I know I have the backup on my iPhone. There are great ways of taking pictures. You let's say you went to a church and you saw a beautiful picture of Our Lady, or a beautiful picture of Jesus, or a statue, or whatever it is. There's some great high definition cameras out there, especially in the iPhone and even the Android, where you take these beautiful pictures. You can look at them and meditate on them, okay, later on, right? Look at those pictures of Our Lady. Look at those pictures of Jesus and all the great saints. It is wonderful, and you can use that to meditate on. You have a little now collection of pictures that you can use to meditate on. So, again, you don't have to share those pictures. It's just pictures that you have of your own. And, I went to Vegas one time. I went to this church not far from my hotel. I was staying at the Luxor, And they had this beautiful picture of Our Lady, a beautiful statue of Our Lady of Carmel. Just tremendous. The scapular must have been the size of like a human chest. It was amazing, this statue. The Pieta. I took pictures of the Pieta, and I meditate on it. I took pictures of, other areas, other famous Roman area, and I meditate on them. So you can use the camera. Number 7, YouTube. Okay, I download songs, chants, Latin prayers, directions. So let's talk about this. Break this down. YouTube is great for a couple of things where I use it. I learn a couple of things as songs, right? So in the Liturgy of the Hours, with me, I try to sing the hymns if I can, especially if I know them. If I don't, I'll read them. But I try to sing the hymns in the Liturgy of the Hours. And I'm the type of person that if I know the tune, I can quickly pick up the tune, and then I can sing the song. So the best way to do it is you just go to YouTube and type in Liturgy of the Hours and then the name of the hymn, and voila, there's someone out there singing that song, that hymn. So, one of them was Sons of Glory, and I didn't even know how that went, but the tune basically goes da na 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 na. And I was like, wow, I know that tune. And then I just put the lyrics in there. So songs, right? Chants, learning chants, learning Latin prayers. I wanted to be able to say the rosary in Latin. So I forced myself to memorize the Ave Maria and the Glory Be. But when it came to the Pater Noster, I was like, oh man, I can't just muscle my way and try to memorize that. So what I did was I went to YouTube and I, Googled the Pater Noster. And so the Pater Noster was actually sung, because in a traditional Mass it's actually sung, Pater Noster, que es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum. And so I started playing that song over and over and over and over again when I was driving. Every time when I was running, I would listen to it, and to the point where I actually mimicked the song and the Latin. And then eventually, I was able to take the song out of the Latin, out of that, and I was able to just say the Pater Noster, que est in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum. What's great about it is that you also get to understand the Latin and its pronunciation as well. So all of this totally free. All right? So you can learn Latin prayers by doing that. Directions, how to do things. When my kids were young, my boys, I had them serve, and they wanted to be servers. But some churches at that time when they were young, they weren't the best, people to learn how to altar serve, because they just kind of threw the kids in there and said, oh yeah, they're cute. All they need to be is cute. That's it. And I was like, no. They actually need to be holy up there. They need to, hold their hands. They need to know what to do with, to do it. Me coming from the Marine Corps, I want to make sure that they look like a military, soldier out there. And so it kind of put the onus on me to teach them how to do it better. So what I did was I just went to YouTube and, typed in, altar boys, and they showed me everything from how altar boys should behave in the traditional Mass as well as the ordinary form. So those are great directions, how to do incense, how to do all these things, various things. So it's important that you can use YouTube on many ways. Listen to songs. You can create your own songs to listen to, whether they're chants or there's beautiful ones out there. They're out there. So that was number 7. Number 6. My number 6 is FaceTime. Okay? Yep, FaceTime. So what can you use for FaceTime? I use it for spiritual direction with a priest, or spiritual coaching, whatever you want to do. So, for example, I do this ministry called A Day with Mary, and our spiritual guide is, our advisor is Father Matthias, and he lives up in Massachusetts. Well, my team really is down in the, I would say, more south of Connecticut and west. So for him to drive to our meetings, and our meetings we might have like once a month, would take him about almost, I would say, about 2.5 hours. Round trip would be 5 hours. That's a long drive. And he doesn't have that time to do that. So what we'll do is we'll FaceTime him, okay? We'll bring him in, or we Skype him, right? Skype or FaceTime him in, and he'll be doing he'll be there. And he'll be our advisor, and he does Perverino, or a little talk. And then at the end, he'll do a blessing. Now, a blessing can be done over FaceTime, but confessions can't be, okay? So you can't do confession. You can do spiritual direction. You can do spiritual guidance. You can have a conversation with your priest over FaceTime or Skype. That's what you can do, okay? And he can give you a blessing, but they cannot do confession. Confession has to be, face-to-face. So very, very, very good, and it's dynamic, and it makes it really real. I know you can say, well, why can't you just use the phone? Having a person there and watching them face-to-face, it's just a whole new dynamic as opposed to just over the phone. You see the expressions of the team or the person. There's a lot of emotions that can be communicated through sight. In fact, any person who knows about speech and talking in public will say, 60 to 66% of communication is through body language. Believe it or not, think about that. It's only, what do they say? It's only probably about 25% is what you're actually, is your content. The other rest of the percentage is how they're hearing it and what they're hearing and stuff. But it's like your inflection, are you high, low? But a lot of it is your body language, how you are presenting yourself. So having that visual aspect is very, very important, and it's more open to the spiritual director because he's seeing that, he's seeing your body language as you're saying certain things and saying, well, are you really being truthful here? Or are you really, or is this really holding you back, and those types of things. Okay. So that's number 6. Number 5, the iPhone calendar. Oh, wow. So you got to understand the next 3 items I'm going to talk about. The reason why these are going to be very, very important is the concept of the oratorium. Okay, oratorium means the hour. Okay, so my wife and I, a long time ago, actually, my wife read the book. It was godsend because we were having some family issues, not marriage issues. It was just like we just knew a couple of things. One was like there was this imperfectness going on, and we didn't have a lot of guidance on how to run a family and everything. And so one day we were at Catholic Family Land, and I saw this book called A Mother's Rule of Life. That's what it was, The Mother's Rule of Life. And I don't know what happened, but I was attracted to the book. I perused it, and I said, this is a book that I'm going to give to my wife. So I gave it to my wife, and my wife ate that book up ferociously, I should say. And the premise of the book is basically that you try to create a monastic life in your family. And so you create this regimented life, as best you can, of course. And so it really helped us out, orientate our day through this thing called an oratorium, which is basically the day broken down into hours, which allow you to say what you do in those hours. So try to understand that. So it's basically scheduling your day. It's important to schedule your day in the spiritual life, adding certain prayers to your. That's what the Liturgy of the Hours is all about, is putting these prayers in there. A lot of people who have problems with the liturgy of hours is because they're not creating an oratorium, which is a schedule, right? They try to ad hoc and say, you know what, I'll try to do morning prayers in the morning. I'll try to do the evening prayers in the evening, rather than saying, no, my morning prayer, I'm going to do them at 5:30 in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is, right? You have to hold yourself accountable. What typically happens is if you say to yourself, I'm going to try to do it in the morning, the world is going to suck you in, and then you're going to be all paranoid because it's getting closer to 12 o'clock and you haven't done your morning prayers, right? Instead of saying, no, I'm going to do it at 5:30, okay? And that's what it should be. I'm going to talk about the oratorium in a separate podcast, and I think it's very important to understand that. But understand that the reason why the iPhone calendar is so awesome is because when I create my schedule of my spiritual life, believe it or not, I put my spiritual time in there. So, for example, I put down in my schedule what time I wake up, what prayers I'm going to say at certain times, okay? At noontime, at lunchtime, I will definitely put in there that I do office of readings, and I do some special readings for a half hour. I do the Angelus. So I take this half hour to do several things. One is the Angelus. Second is to do office of readings, which is part of the liturgy of the hours. And the last is whatever time I have left to do some spiritual reading. Could be 5, 10, 15 minutes of spiritual reading right there. And then in the evening, I put down exactly when I do evening prayers, okay? So, and then when I go to bed, right? Actually, when you go to bed is actually the most important thing in there. And because I exercise most of the days, I do have a schedule that is is a little different for each of the days. But the oratorium is very important, and we'll talk about that. So the calendar, iPhone calendar, allows me to see where my spiritual life is going to, what I'm doing, holds me accountable of when I'm going to be doing these prayers, how I'm going to do it. What's also neat about the calendar is that as a businessman, I do have to travel, or I do have to go to earlier meetings, and so my life will change. So what happens is my secretary might send a calendar invite that says something like, need to be in Boston at a 9 o'clock meeting. Well, when that happens, I put in how long it's going to take me. It's going to take me 3 hours. So that means I have to I have to leave the house by 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, at 6 o'clock in the morning, I have a prayer that I have to do, right? I have to do morning prayer. And I have to do Angelus. So now it automatically tells me, well, how am I going to handle this? Okay. So it automatically allows me to budget my time appropriately. Do I wake up earlier so I can do those prayers? Or maybe what I do is I wake up earlier to take my drive, and then I go out at a rest stop and I do my prayers. Okay. Also, the meeting might be at 9 o'clock, but maybe the meeting lasts until 1 o'clock. Well, then now my 12 o'clock prayer time is impacted. So now I'm going to move that 12 o'clock prayer time to, let's say, 1 o'clock. All right. I stop at a rest stop and I do my prayers. So the calendar allows me to hold me accountable to those prayers. I know put those prayers in there, and and so that I follow them. And then if life impacts them, how am I going to handle those prayers? So, for example, another example is, in the evening time, my wife might have some things planned in the evening. So where am I going to do my evening prayer? Maybe I do it at 3 o'clock. Maybe I do it when I come back. And those types of things. So it's those things that are there to help you manage your prayer life in your day and your work as well. So the iPhone calendar. My calendar is integrated with my work calendar, as well as my wife sends me a lot of calendar invites as well. Number 4, the iPhone clock. Okay, what is the iPhone clock? The iPhone clock is basically the clock that allows you to set, wake-up calls, right? So, again, going back to the oratorium, I have, my clock is my alarm for when I wake up, okay? And it's also when I go home, okay? When I go home, it's funny because what I do is I set it at 4:30 to go off so that I can do my evening prayers, which takes, I always budget about 15 minutes to do evening prayers. It's sometimes less, but 15 minutes will definitely do that. And then it gives me time to go home. So I'm home usually around 5 or 5:10. So, that's what happens. So I have an alarm that does that. I have an alarm that goes off at 12 o'clock to do the Angelus and to remind me to do my evening prayer. I'm sorry, not evening prayer, my office of readings. Remember, going back to my oratorium again, my calendar, my schedule, because that's my time to do spiritual reading, do office of readings, as well as the Angelus. So the clock, it's the modern day version of the bell. So in the olden days, they used bells to remind people. So in the secular world, in the olden days, they would have bells. They would have 3 bells, and they called it the Angelus bells. So they would have the 6 o'clock Angelus bell, they would have the 12 o'clock Angelus bell, and they would have the 6 o'clock evening Angelus bell, so that you, at least the secular world, that is, if you didn't live in a monastery, you would at least done 3 prayers of the Angelus prayers, 6 in the morning, 12 in the afternoon, and 6 in the evening. Well, now, in modern days, you don't hear any bells, right? Especially in a very Protestant country like America. So what you would then have is you can use your iPhone clock, the alarms, to be your new bell. When to go home, when to go, when to do certain prayers. If you go and live, if you ever stay at a monastery or visit a monastery, you'll hear bells. Bells for collecting for dinner, bells for waking up. So you can use your iPhone clock and envision that it's really a bell. And it's funny because I use little bells as my reminders. It goes, it's one of the tunes that it goes on. So the iPhone clock, think of it as the modern day bell, church bell. Okay, so that's number 4. Number 3, the iPhone timer. Remember, so 3, 4, and 5. These all go back to the oratorium. So the iPhone timer. Okay, why is a timer so important? Because for the main reason is that spiritual reading and meditation time is a way to time what you're doing. So we as tertiaries are mandated, I shouldn't say mandated, highly, can I emphasize more highly in that? Highly encouraged to do spiritual reading and meditation. Our goal is to do half hour's worth of spiritual reading and a half hour worth of meditation time. That is sometimes very difficult. But if you use a timer, it helps you to be more accountable, and it helps you to know when to begin and stop. So, for example, spiritual reading. I will do spiritual reading. I'll say I committed to do 15 minutes of spiritual reading at this time. So you set a timer, right? 15 minutes. Boom. You read, bell goes off, you stop. Done. It helps you to be more accountable. That's really what it does. So timers are very, very important. In meditation, doing your meditation, doing maybe even like controlling how much time you use for the internet, right? So let's say you make a resolution to say, I'm only going to do 30 minutes worth of internet time. You put a timer on it, right? It's very easy to say, oh, I'll just use the clock, right? But when you get sucked into the internet or when you get sucked into the web, that half hour, really winds up being 2 hours because you're just sucked in. But when you hear a timer and it goes off, bling, that's the kick that says you need to get off now. Okay, so it's great to help you control things and help you be more accountable. So the iPhone timer. The next, and the timer should be counting down. Okay, not like a stopwatch counter. It's more of counting down. So you set it at 15 minutes, and it's counting down, and once it goes to 0, it sets an alarm. That's what you do. Number 2, okay, the I Breviary or Brev Meum, okay? So the I Breviary is the ordinary form. The Brev Meum is the traditional form of the breviary. Okay, so the iBreviary, it's the only one that I know of that I like because it has the translations nicely. It's free, and they have most of the feast days, and it's coordinated with the universal calendar as well. So I think the U.S. calendar as well. So it's a go-to. Now I'm going to warn you with the iBreviary. This is the one where people use and say, hey, why do I have to know how to do it manually versus just using this technology? Do it manually. I only use the iBreviary when I'm in a pinch, okay? So if I forgot my breviary or, the things, I do the 4-volume, and the thing that kind of, I will admit, gets me a little bit frustrated is when I have to switch books. So recently, we just finished the Christmas season, and we had to go to the ordinary season. So it's 2 different books, right? We went from volume 1 to volume 3 book. So, and I don't know, I think it's just God's way of, encouraging my virtues. But inevitably, when the switch occurs, I'm always traveling. And that's exactly what happened just past week. So Sunday was the end of the season, and I had to switch books because I was traveling, and so I'm like, I don't want to carry 2 books. It sounds kind of lazy, so I'll just bring 1 book, and then I'll use the other book using the iBreviary. So that's a way, but a lot of times it's mainly because I can't find my book or something happened to the book, so I'll have to use it in a pinch, okay? And doing that. So my number 1 app, and it's not really an app, okay, but it is really important. My number 1, and there really is no substitute to it, masstimes.org, okay? So the app is really the web browser, but the URL is called masstimes.org. I don't recommend using their app. In fact, I don't like their app, but because they do have an app. But I just go to the URL, masstimes.org. I travel a lot. I probably travel about 20% of my work time, which, people might say, well, that's not a lot. It is to me. And we go driving. And this is an application that allows you to get to know where the local churches are, find them, and know what their schedule are. Okay, and you could break it down into confession, to adoration, and a couple other features that they have. So it's not only the day, but you could break it down to what the sacrament or sacramentals that they're celebrating. And break it down that way. And then it's easy as just clicking a button to say, give me the directions, calling them, doing whatever you want. The only caution that I would have with masstimes.org is that, as we all know, we do have a priestly vocation, crisis. And so a lot of churches are being merged or ended, and parishes and all that other stuff, and schedules are being redone. So and masstimes.org doesn't get updated frequently. So I would say 30% of the time it could be inaccurate. So what I do is I will eventually go to the website of the mass. So let's say, for example, I'm in, Atlanta, Georgia, and they say that St. Gregory's is at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they have a mass at that time at masstimes.org. What I'll do is I'll go to St. Gregory's website, actual website. Most 99.9% of them will have the bulletin online. I will go to the bulletin, and I will look at their mass schedule and to verify that they do have an 8 o'clock. And to be super, super, super validated, I look at their mass intentions, because the mass intentions will definitely say that there's a mass intention at that certain time. So that's how you can super duper know that that mass is going to be going. And in case, in short of the priest not showing up because, of a dire emergency, you're almost guaranteed that the mass is going to occur. And you should do that, and mainly because, again, because of the shortage of priests, a lot of these parishes are merging and things are happening and everything else, or they might have an unusual celebration, like, maybe it's Christmas season or Easter season, and they'll have like different events going on. So masstimes.org, the best tool, number one for me. Okay. And I use it, and there really is no substitute. That's something that there is no manual process for. It is what it is. All right. So that's my top 10. I'm going to go over quick a couple of honorable mentions. Okay. A couple honorable mentions. One is the electronic donation to churches. My wife and I, we use the electronic donations for churches, and it is so important. With kids, especially when we had a lot of young kids, we don't have as many young kids. We always have this intention, like, oh my goodness, I have to put this check inside this envelope and then dump it in there. And between trying to get like 6 kids out the door and go to mass, we inevitably forgot, or we couldn't find the envelopes, or something happened, right? And all this other stuff. And my wife and I, we tithe, so it just felt like, oh my gosh, we were never giving our money to the church, So what we decided to do was electronic donations, and it sometimes occurs where when they come out with the basket, I say a short little prayer saying that you can, I gave my donation to electronics so that you get the benefits spiritually as well. Also, they give you fake envelopes where you can give to the kids and they can just throw it in there. The next is Kindle. Kindle is a good app, especially now that a lot of books are going the Kindle way, and the books are a lot cheaper, so for your spiritual reading. The last two, I say it, but just understand that it's, there's a lot of cautions around it. The web browser, a lot of religious articles, religious websites that are out there, social media as well. There's a lot of religious people out there, a lot of religious groups out there. So, go out there. But again, the caution there is it could be very addictive, which leads me to risks of using technology and how to mitigate them. I'm going to do it real quickly because I don't have much time. But let's go over it, okay? The first is the veracity of the material, right? The truthfulness of the material. The internet has a plethora of information and everything else. So most of the apps that I gave you, I would say at least 5 of them, they're just they're just point blank helpful. But there were 5 of them there, the other 5 that were probably, you would have to validate the veracity of the material. And I'll give you an example. For example, masstimes.org. I told you might need to go to that. The reason why I chose iBreviary was because I know there are other breviary apps, but I tended to see that they weren't really following the calendar correctly, or they weren't, or the prayers correctly. Okay. So the veracity of the material, it's important to understand that, especially if you're going on the web and social media. I don't care if it's, friar so-and-so or priest so-and-so, the veracity has to be validated. Number 2 risk, distractions. Oh my goodness. The reason why, so one of my recommendations is if you're doing the iBreviary, okay, put your cell phone on plane mode. And the reason why is because the worst thing that you want to have to do is you're doing your breviary, you're doing your liturgy of the hours, and all of a sudden you get like a text from this, a text from that, an email from this, an email from that. You might as well not even do the liturgy of the hours. So put it on plane mode and say, this is 15 minutes, this is my prayer time. End of story. And doing that. So distractions when you're using the technology. So that's a good example. Going through the motions. The iBreviary is an example. You're just going through the motion because it's just everything's there. So you just say the prayers, and that's it. Okay. Donating. Another example is donating electronically, which was an honorable mention. It just becomes, you don't care. You're like, oh yeah, it's a donation. And you forget that you're donating, right, to the church because of that aspect of it. So you have to kind of back that up and say a little prayer when the donations occur, or with a breviary, use more conscientious thinking about how you're praying it. Okay. With the distractions, as I said, put it on plane mode. We're going to talk about something called, I call it red herrings and rabbit holes, which also causes distractions, but it's in a different way. So that's going to be a separate topic. But when I talk about distractions, number 2 is really about like things like, bells going off, or, text messages going off, or, phone ringing off, or email, thing going off. You have to like put it on silent mode, not silent mode, but airplane mode. That will stop anyone who's trying to text you, anyone who's trying to call you, email, all that's going to end. So plane mode, that's simple distractions. Number 4, scandal. Okay. This is difficult because, and it happened this morning, I forgot my liturgy, my tertiary book, and I had to do certain prayers. And so I use my iPhone to do it, right? It's a little bit, it's kind of scandalous to start looking at your phone in the middle of church. People are looking at you going, who's that guy that's using the phone during the church, right? When really what you're doing is using it for prayers. The only way that you can mitigate it is sometimes I try to hide it within a book. Sometimes you have these cases that look like you're reading a book, but it's really a thing. You can do it that way. Do it where, you're behind less people. And at the end of the day, you know what? You have to do your prayers. So, but there is that, the risk, right? So I mentioned a couple of ways to mitigate it. Just hide it into a book and see if you can kind of look like you're looking at a book. Sometimes they have these nice iPhone cases that look like it is a book, right? And then sit in the back if you can. It was for daily mass. I'm going to talk about addiction. Okay. One thing about a lot of these, especially when it comes to social media, the internet, and Google, they can be very, very addictive. And addiction doesn't, I always tell people, it's not like someone wakes up and says, you know what, I want to be addicted to social media. I want to be addicted to drugs or to Google or to, internet. No one wakes up and says that. The reason why you get addicted is because, you get sucked up into that world. And before you know it, you thought you were going to be there for 15 minutes. You're on there for 15 hours. So the addiction aspect of it is the fact that it just consumes you because you're so interested in it. And now that addiction becomes attachment, and attachment is not good, right? So what you got to do is you got to use timers, right? You got to really, really have a timer that says, look, I'm okay. I'm okay going to the social media. Let's say it's it deals with the traditional mass or something like that. You're going in there. And you say, I'm going to be there for 15 minutes, put a timer on there. When it goes off, you say, okay, I'm done. I move. That's it. Okay? So addictions, they can be very, very addictive. All right. And you got to set timers on yourself. That's what we do with our kids. Let's say they're playing, we do allow them to play, let's say, a video game. We'll say, okay, you got 15 minutes. Or not 15. Well, you got a half hour. Put the timer on. And they put a timer on. They play for half hour, and then they're done. That's it. The other is, I call it red herrings and rabbit holes. And those things basically are like YouTube will cause that, Google when you're researching. Even if you're researching good things, they become you'll find that you went down a red herring or a rabbit hole. What is that? What's a red herring? Red herring is going down into things that the original topic was something, but you're going down somewhere else, okay? A rabbit hole is that you're going into, you thought that it was going to be a small little topic, but then it blew up into this bigger topic or went somewhere else, right? The issue with that is, when you're using like things like YouTube or, or even a lot of social media or Google or websites, they have things like advertisements, or they throw things in there that, people are trying to get you at, whether they're advertisements or whether they're subtopics or whatever. And that's what happens. You just go down these holes that are like, how did I get here? How do I get there? Maybe you're reading like, I don't know, this Catholic website, and they have advertisements, and they have and some of those advertisements are not Catholic. You got to remember that. And then you're like, it catches your eyes, and you're like, oh, let me check that out, and you click that. And before you know it, you're down a wrong area, and sometimes even bad areas. And the bad thing about the internet, and whether it be YouTube or whatever, as well, is they are tracking you. And when you go down that rabbit hole, they will track you and say, you went down that rabbit hole, we're going to send you more advertisement about that rabbit hole. Okay? So those are the things that you can, the risks and how to mitigate them. To mitigate the rabbit hole and the red herrings, stick with the topic. Only do those topics. Use a timer to get yourself out, and that will be your safeguard. Okay? So, in conclusion, technology is not evil of in itself. It could be used to help us grow spiritually, but my default is always to prefer the manual. If there is a manual process, the default is always the traditional way. And a lot of times use technology more as a fallback, okay, and not as the primary, if possible, okay? And use timers to control yourself with those technology, okay? And that ends our episode. Let's end it with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for all the things you've given us, even technology. Help us to use the technology. Let us use it wisely, gratefully, as well as to help us grow spiritually. Let us never be addicted to it. Let us always master it. As we pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Thanks for listening to me, David Cease, at Practical Catholic. Here's a reflection for you. Take a moment and reflect, am I using my mobile devices to help grow spiritually? Feel free to share your reflection or leave a comment on the podcast, Instagram, and Facebook at Practical Catholic, or visit my webpage at practicalcatholic1, that is the number 1.com.
You're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.